Two Egypts and the Seth paradox. Tonight, I want you to picture two Egypts. One is the Egypt you know, the green ribbon of the Nile, fields alive with grain, orderly cities, temples that feel like stone promises. The other Egypt is the one you might forget. The red land beyond the river, the desert that swallows footprints, the sudden sandstorm that turns noon into night, the thunder that cracks the sky like a warning. If you only look at the first Egypt, you might assume Egyptian mythology is all about harmony, stability, and the perfect calm of the divine order. But Egypt survived because it respected the second Egypt too. And that is where Seth, also spelled Set, steps in. Seth is often introduced as the villain of Egyptian myth, the jealous brother who murdered Osiris and tore the divine family apart. In some later traditions, he is treated almost like a devil figure, pure chaos, pure evil, the enemy of everything good. But here is the twist that changes everything. In many Egyptian stories, Seth is not just a destroyer. He is also the protector of the sun god Ra, the fierce bodyguard who stands on the front of the solar boat every night, fighting the serpent of cosmic annihilation. So what is Seth really? A monster? A misunderstood hero? Or something more unsettling? A necessary force that Egypt feared but could not live without? This is the story of Seth, storm god, desert lord, rival king, and the chaotic power that forever lives at the edge of order. Ma'at, Isfet, and the god of the Red Land. To understand Seth, you have to start with what he represents. Egyptian religion had a concept called Ma'at, order, truth, balance, the stable pattern that keeps the world from collapsing. Ma'at was not just a moral idea. It was cosmic engineering. The gods upheld it, the pharaoh embodied it, and the people participated in it through ritual and right living. But Ma'at did not mean the world was gentle. It meant the world was held together. And that implies something else, something pressing from the outside, something trying to unravel the pattern. That force was often described as Isfet, chaos, injustice, disruption, the wrongness that cracks the cosmic foundation. Seth lives in that tension. He is the god of storms, the desert, wild strength, and the dangerous places where structure breaks down. He is linked with the Red Land, the arid wilderness beyond the Nile's green life. He is noise, heat, thunder, sharp wind, foreignness, the unpredictable surge that can either save you or destroy you. Even Seth's animal form reflects this strangeness. It is not a lion, not a jackal, not a crocodile. It is the so-called Seth animal, a creature with a curved snout, tall, square-tipped ears, and a body that looks like it belongs to no single species. It is almost as if Seth was designed to be unclassifiable, something you cannot fully tame with a label. And that matters, because in myth, labels are control. Seth refuses control. The divine family and Egypt's inner map. Seth is born into the heart of the most famous divine family in Egypt. His siblings include Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys. Osiris becomes a symbol of civilizing kingship, the ruler who brings order, agriculture, and the rhythm of life. Isis is the great magician and protector, the power of devotion and restoration. Nephthys is often linked with liminal spaces, mourning, protection, the edges of life and death. And then there is Seth. In some versions, Seth is paired with Nephthys, while Osiris is paired with Isis. Two couples, two principles, one aligned with fertile continuity, the other aligned with the harsh outer world. This is not just divine family drama. It is a mythic map of Egypt itself. Green land and red land, river and desert, life and the threat that always surrounds it. For a long time, Seth's role could be respected. Storms bring destruction, yes, but storms also bring power. The desert is deadly, yes, but it is also a boundary, a fortress, a testing ground. Even in human life, not everything valuable is gentle. But then comes the fracture, the story that cements Seth's reputation for thousands of years. The Osiris crisis. The Osiris crisis. Osiris is king. The world is stable. The cycle of life feels secure. and Seth cannot accept it. Depending on the version, Seth is motivated by jealousy, rivalry, or a claim to power that he believes is his by right. Sometimes the myth emphasizes personal resentment. Sometimes it emphasizes political legitimacy. Either way, what happens next becomes one of the most iconic betrayals in mythology. Seth hosts a feast. He presents a magnificent chest, beautifully made, perfectly shaped, and he announces that it will be gifted to whoever fits inside it exactly. One by one, the guests try. None fit. Then Osiris steps in, and the chest closes. Seth slams down the lid, seals it, and the king is trapped, cut off from air, cut off from life, swallowed by a box of his own measurements. The chest is thrown into the river. The king is carried away. And with that, the myth tells you something profound. Order can be killed. The world can break. Not slowly, not politely, but suddenly, like a storm front sweeping over the land. Isis goes searching. She crosses boundaries, follows rumors, listens to whispers. The goddess of magic becomes a goddess of endurance. She is not just grieving, she is working. In many versions of the story, Isis finds the chest. She recovers Osiris. But Seth finds him too. And this is where the myth becomes darker, fragmented, scattered. Osiris is dismembered. The body becomes pieces separated across the land, as if kingship itself has been torn into unrecognizable parts. Isis and Nephthys gather what they can. Through ritual, through devotion, through magic, they restore him enough for a miracle. Osiris fathers a child, Horus, the heir. Osiris does not return to rule the living world. He becomes something else. He becomes Lord of the Dead, King of the Underworld, ruler of the realm where justice weighs the soul. That is the price of Seth's attack. A king dies, and the afterlife gains its sovereign. In other words, Seth's crime does not just hurt a family, it reshapes the universe. Now, if you stopped the story here, Seth is easy to hate. He murdered the good king, he shattered the world, he forced the divine order into crisis. But Egyptian myth almost never stays that simple. Because in Egypt, a crisis is not only tragedy, it is also a test. And tests reveal what is real. So the myth does what it always does. It demands a reckoning. Osiris is gone from the throne of the living. The question becomes unavoidable. Who rules now? Horus, the son, the rightful heir? Or Seth, the powerful contender? Older, stronger, terrifyingly competent. This is where the story transforms into something almost shockingly modern. A legal battle. A cosmic court case. The contest of Horus and Seth. The contest of Horus and Seth. The gods gather, they argue, they deliberate. Sometimes Ra is involved. Sometimes the divine council is led by other gods, but the feeling is consistent. This is not just about who can punch harder. It is about legitimacy. Egypt cared about the stability of succession because stability was survival. A disputed throne meant rebellion, famine, invasion, collapse. So myth turns the divine world into a courtroom because the pharaoh's world depended on the idea that rule could be justified, not merely seized. Horus presents his claim. He is the son of Osiris, the rightful successor. Seth presents his claim. He is powerful, proven, and necessary, fit to protect Egypt by force. And then the contest begins. In different versions, the trials are strange, symbolic, sometimes brutal. There are challenges of strength and endurance, trickery, and tactics. There are episodes that feel like folklore, shape-shifting contests, races, elaborate tests designed to expose character as much as capability. And here is the key. The gods do not decide quickly, because neither option is simple. Horus represents continuity, the smooth flow of rightful inheritance. Seth represents raw power, the ability to confront threats with violence if necessary. Egypt wants Horus, but it fears what happens without Seth's strength. So the myth stalls, debates, escalates, tests. Again and again, the world tries to figure out what kind of kingship can hold Ma'at in place. Eventually, in most versions, Horus wins. The throne passes to him. The rightful heir is crowned. Order resumes. And Seth? Seth is punished in some traditions, exiled, diminished. But in many other traditions, especially earlier ones, Seth is not erased. He is assigned a role, a dangerous role, a role at the border. Because Egypt does not just need a king, it needs a guardian. And guardians are not always gentle. Why myths have multiple versions? Before we go on, let us pause for something that confuses a lot of people. Why are there so many versions of these stories? Because Egyptian mythology was not written like a single holy book. It was a living religious culture that lasted for thousands of years across many regions. Different temples promoted different gods. Different cities emphasized different traditions. Different dynasties shaped myths to support their political legitimacy. So when you hear Seth did this or Horus did that, you are not always hearing a strict, fixed canon. You are hearing a tradition that evolved. Sometimes Seth is a hated traitor. Sometimes he is a respected power. Sometimes he is a necessary defender. Sometimes he is portrayed as a foreign associated threat because the politics of the time made outsiders feel dangerous. Myths are mirrors. They reflect the needs and fears of the culture telling them. That is why Seth can be both villain and protector, because Egypt itself needed to understand both faces of chaos. Seth, Ra, and the night battle. Now we return to the greatest twist of Seth's story. Because even after the Osiris crisis, even after the contest, even after Seth becomes the problem, the sun still has to rise. And every night, the sun god Ra must travel through darkness. In Egyptian belief, the sun does not just dip below the horizon and rest. It journeys through the underworld, through dangerous territory, where the forces of chaos try to devour it. And the greatest of those forces is Apep, also called Apophis, a colossal serpent of uncreation. Apep is not just a monster. Apep is the idea that the universe can fail, that the sun can be swallowed, that time can stop, that Ma'at can be undone forever. So every night, Ra's solar bark sails through the black waters. The gods and spirits aboard it prepare for battle. And at the front of that ship, like a spear point, stands Seth. Yes, Seth. The same god who shattered the divine family. The same god who fought Horus for the throne. The same god labeled chaos. In many traditions, Seth is the one strong enough, fierce enough, violent enough to strike Apep back into the dark. Think about what that means. Egypt is telling you that chaos can be used to fight chaos, that the dangerous storm can be turned against the greater annihilation, that you do not defend the world with softness alone. Sometimes you need a god who knows how to hit like thunder. In this role, Seth becomes the paradox at the heart of Egyptian cosmology. He is Isfet, harnessed to preserve Ma'at. How Egyptians thought about evil. It helps to understand that Egypt did not always treat evil the way later religions do. There was not one ultimate devil ruling a kingdom of sin. Instead, there was Ma'at, order, and the constant risk of its collapse. Chaos was not just moral wrongdoing, it was cosmic instability. Famine, disease, invasion, civil war, sudden death. These were not random to the Egyptian mind. They were signs that balance had been disturbed. So the goal was not to destroy evil forever. The goal was to maintain balance every day. That is why the sun's journey repeats nightly. That is why rituals repeat constantly. That is why kingship is a perpetual responsibility, not a one-time victory. In that worldview, a god like Seth is not automatically bad. He is dangerous. And danger can be a tool, or a catastrophe. It depends on who holds the reins. Strength, legitimacy, and the edge of order. Now let us look at the deeper symbolism of the Horus and Seth conflict, because it is not only family revenge. It is a mythic explanation of what Egypt expects from a ruler. Horus is the ideal heir, connected to Osiris, supported by Isis, representing rightful succession and continuity. Horus is also linked to the sky, to vision, to the hawk's command over the horizon. He is the ruler who sees. Seth is the forceful contender, storm power, desert power, the raw capacity to confront threats. Seth is the ruler who strikes. The myth asks a question that every civilization asks. Is a good ruler defined by lineage and legitimacy, or by strength and ability? Egypt's answer across many traditions is nuanced. Horus becomes king, yes, but Seth is not always destroyed. He is often repositioned, assigned to protect, to guard, to channel violence outward rather than inward. In other words, Horus represents kingship inside the walls. Seth represents the threat beyond the walls, and the weapon you use against it. And the tragedy happens when that weapon turns inward. When the guardian becomes the rival. When the storm breaks the house instead of defending it. But there is another layer to Seth that is easy to miss. Because Seth is not only the god of destruction, he is also the god of necessary separation. The desert cuts Egypt off from the world, but it also protects it. The storm wrecks things, but it also clears stagnation. The loud, disruptive force ends false peace and exposes weakness. Seth can be the catastrophe or the corrective. And this is why he remains fascinating. He forces you to admit that order is not automatic. Order has enemies. And sometimes order needs sharp teeth. Seth as scapegoat and essential force. Here is a thought experiment. If Seth is chaos, and chaos must be defeated, why does Egypt keep bringing him back? Why does Seth keep showing up on the solar boat? Why do some pharaohs adopt Seth's imagery or honor him in certain regions? Because in a world where the desert exists, you cannot pretend the desert is not real. You can build walls, you can dig canals, you can pray, you can organize society. But the storm still comes. So the question becomes, do you deny the storm or do you learn to survive it? Seth represents the answer Egypt gave. You acknowledge the storm, you give it a name, you make it a god, and then you try carefully to place it where it protects rather than destroys. That is not a comfortable theology, but it is a realistic one. And it is why Seth remains one of the most humanly recognizable gods Egypt ever imagined. The meaning of Seth. So what do we do with Seth? If we call him purely evil, we lose the meaning of half his stories. We lose the way Egypt understood danger, not as an outside anomaly, but as a constant neighbor. We lose the truth that chaos can be both enemy and tool. And we lose the central lesson of the Horus and Seth conflict. Power without legitimacy becomes tyranny, but legitimacy without strength can become helplessness. Seth is the storm at the edge of the map. He is the force you cannot invite into your home, but also the force you may need, standing outside your door when the greater darkness comes. In the end, Seth is not the devil. He is the reminder that Ma'at, order, balance, the good life, does not happen because the universe is kind. It happens because someone, every day, holds the world together. And in Egyptian myth, sometimes the one holding back the abyss is the very god you were taught to fear. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Egyptian mythology, hit like, subscribe for more stories from the ancient world, and tell me in the comments, do you see Seth as a villain, a guardian, or something in between? Your perspective might shape the next myth we explore.